welcome back to the Ketogenic Fasting Program. I This is video number 42, and this one's all about just transitioning to carnivore from the ketogenic diet. A lot of people are doing it these days, and I've done it. I first tried carnivore in roughly December 2017. I did it for a month. Then I went back to ketogenic to compare for a few months. And then I basically gradually just transitioned to carnivore. And got a number of reasons why. And for me, all of this is a big experiment anyways, to see what I can do to improve all kinds of things, you know. So a lot of people are doing it now because it seems to be very effective when it comes to treating autoimmune diseases, which is one of the things that concerns me. So in a lot of ways, the dietary things that people are going through right now are a logical progression. So the low carb wave hit, you know, and before that there was really kind of a high protein wave. And then, you know, you saw paleo and Whole30 and all kinds of stuff gain traction. And then there came ketogenic by storm. And a lot of people, you know, they got in the mode of understanding macronutrients, how to manipulate their diet, you know, how to eat outside the box, as it were. And naturally the level of awareness increases, right? People are spreading information faster. You know, we use Facebook and all kinds of other ways to, you know, Pinterest and Snapchat and Kick and everything else, you know. So, and of course, Instagram and tweets, you know. So people's awareness that these are not necessarily just fad diets, but really they're all kind of a continuation on a thread. And people also started to realize that fat, you know, particularly saturated fat from animals, wasn't dangerous like we were led to believe. And that opened up a whole lot of options for people. I mean, you talk to people about why people get fat and sick, and they're like, oh, well, they don't exercise enough. They don't walk enough. You know, we drive cars and we sit around watching TV and playing video games, and there's a bunch of preservatives in the food, and there's pollution and everything, and that's why we're fat and sick, you know. And then little by little, kind of find out, well, it's really more specifically that we eat too many refined carbohydrates. There's too much wheat. There's too much sugar. There's too much all kinds of stuff like that. You know, essentially all carbohydrates are sugars, and we're overexposed to them, and it does all kinds of things to our body, like cause diabetes, cancer, and obesity, autoimmune diseases, leaky gut, increased permeability, as some people say. And once people learn that they can shift from eating a bulk of carbohydrates for calories to a fat adapted state, it opens up a lot of doors. A lot of people start increasing their health and activity and their mood and everything else. You know, there's all kinds of people talk about their depression going away. There's all kinds of talk about schizophrenia being reduced, and like I mentioned before, autoimmune diseases. And people just have more energy and they sleep better, and so they start to resolve issues. More data comes out, and nobody really knows what everything means in the beginning, but since people are used to trying diets and they have fewer worries about it and it's more accepted, then, you know, once you get fat adapted, you can try a lot of these things out, and you can go back and forth and see what it's like. And part of learning to eat fat is to unlearn the things that we were brought up to believe. But there's myths that come along with everything, and there's more unlearning to do than just eating more fat. I think fasting is a powerful tool. It may not be the first choice for people who are trying to put on muscle, but I didn't really find that I lost any muscle. And when you're losing a lot of weight, your body composition is transitioning, and your body's going to recycle uh, connective tissue and all kinds of stuff, even skin and all kinds of other sources of amino acids and proteins. So you're not necessarily going to lose muscle. And a lot of people like working out in the fasted state, and people like myself have benefited and enjoyed prolonged fast. So I don't think we know all the hard science behind it, other than, yeah, if you're trying to meet a goal in a sport, or you're trying to put on a lot of muscle, then maybe fasting isn't for you, or isn't the right strategy. But it should definitely be on people's radar, because it can be a very powerful tool, just like ketosis. If you can look at the carnivore diet from multiple perspectives, and of course, one of the really strong perspectives in the ketogenic diet and the paleo diet and the whole 30 is going to be the ancestral health concept. So aside from addressing autoimmune diseases and the fact that it is a very simple diet, it's very easy to follow. You do not have to worry about macronutrients and, getting enough of this or that, or balancing things out. I put this picture in here because this is from a display in a museum. That guy right there is looking at his dwelling, which is made from mammoth bones. Believe it or not, there are quite a number of structures out there that they've found in archaeological digs. Human beings used to eat so many mammoths, they used to build their homes out of their bones. So we kind of all grow up, at least I did, a lot of us do, that, like, everybody before civilization, before, the ancient Egyptians or the Sumerians, there wasn't any wide cultivation of crops, so everybody was a hunter and a gatherer. But there is a strong archaeological and biological argument that we really didn't collect and eat plants unless we couldn't get enough fatty animals. And when I mean elephants, three-toed sloths, woolly rhinos, mastodons, obviously mammoths, and we followed these creatures around and ate them, and that's how we evolved to be who we are. And that's one of the biggest problems with our diet, and that is one of the biggest arguments for a carnivore diet, and why it seems to be a healing diet for a lot of people. You could say, well, you're really just eliminating a lot of crap from your diet that was making you sick, and that's entirely possible. And I'm not saying anybody knows for sure or for certain, but for people like myself, this is a great experiment. I dive right into this because I had bad arthritis, and the arthritis is gone, but I still have some psoriasis. I still want to shed some extra body fat. I still want to get in better shape. And so this is, to me, looks like a fantastic opportunity. I really don't have any fear. I eat right now. I'm eating one pork steak and one beef steak a day. Sometimes I have eggs. I recently cut out all the cheese and butter and stuff like that. That was some of the holdover that I was still eating from the ketogenic diet. I cut out pepper. I used to put pepper on my meat. Now I just put some salt on my meat. I cook it in animal fat, whatever. I do eat some bacon. There's a little argument in there that the bacon might not be particularly carnivore, but my psoriasis, as of the last 4 or 5 days, has gotten drastically better. So I think cutting out the cheese and the butter was a good idea. So, unlearning healthy heart hypothesis, that is kind of the crux of what we were all raised on. The bias against meat goes way back. It's over 100 years old. It was reinforced. A lot of Eastern philosophy was kind of imported into the United States in the 60s or whatever. In certain parts of the world, the flesh pot is an abomination, and this mentality developed that meat was bad, meat was cruel, meat was was bad for the environment, it was bad for your body, it makes your body acidic or whatever. But the science does not support that. And people grabbed at shreds of science all the time and tried to prove this. But not only is meat good for you, but plants might be a lot worse for us than we know, especially if you're somebody with an autoimmune disease. You know, the argument for eating plants is one, that you need fiber, and this is apparently not true. I haven't had a shred of fiber in a long time, and I could tell you everything is regular, working like a clock. Um, Plants are full of micronutrients. They talk about all these, oh, you know, you get iron, vitamin C, and all kinds of this and that and the other things. You put herbs, you know, ketogenic diet, all kinds of seasonings are encouraged in a lot of the books because they contain all these micronutrients. And the truth is, you can find those micronutrients in the plant material, and you can do tests that show that they have some benefit in the body. But what's overlooked is the fact that plants typically have defense mechanisms, namely in the form of proteins like lectins, but there's also oxalates, and the other one's slipping my mind. But these can be irritants um, to the human body. And in fact, they're generally generated in the plants so that it discourages predation. So the plants develop these compounds in order to keep animals and bugs and everything from eating them. This is tobacco creates nicotine, which most bugs don't like, and you know, I'm trying to think of another example. Well, chili peppers, you know, they have capsaicin in them, and that's meant to keep people from eating them, animals from eating them, bugs from eating them. So we enjoy spices like that, and like I said, I give up black pepper. Same thing. The pepperine is an irritant, and when you're on a diet that is the wrong diet, one of the potential side effects is that the lining of your small intestine becomes very permeable, and then pieces of food essentially that get into the bloodstream, and your immune system thinks it's some sort of infection, some sort of, you know, foreign body in the blood. It starts producing antibodies. These antibodies go out and attack these particles, and those antibodies also wind up attacking different tissues in the body, different systems in the body. And that's kind of the crux of the autoimmune disease. And now there's a strong correlation between a lot of plants and leaky gut or increased gut permeability. So another argument for people with autoimmune disease is to try an alternative diet that deliberately avoids this possibility, to see if you start healing up. There's a good book about it called The Plant Paradox. I did a report on that, so you can watch that video, give you a little more insight. Another thing is, you know, when I got into keto, the clinical standard for nutritional ketosis was 0.5 millimolars of beta hydroxybutyrate in your blood. So when you do the blood test, which anybody can do at home, I've got a video on that. That was considered nutritional ketosis. That was a point where, you know, you're burning plenty of fat and everything was hunky-dory. Well, now they're starting to see that people, especially after they're adapted, at levels of 0.3 are doing great. They're getting all the benefits. And so, you know, it's a little murky as to how hard you need to really work to stay in ketosis. And like the Inuits, they typically are genetically adapted to not go into ketosis, but they just eat meat all the time. They're just eating caribou and seal and fish and, you know, whatever animals all the time. A lot of them live in areas where there's basically little or no vegetation. There's very little to eat vegetation-wise. So, do you really need to be in ketosis all the time? No, apparently not. I mean, ketosis is a powerful tool. It's probably a good part of the learning to get fat adapted, and having beta hydroxybutyrate levels elevated in your blood is really just a sign that you're burning fat. But the beta hydroxybutyrate itself is just one constituent fuel. Most of your body is actually being fueled by fatty acid chains that you can't really test in your blood. So we have to look at things like dairy. There's lots of people tell you that dairy doesn't agree with them. So, that's no big surprise. But dairy, especially butter and even cheese, is pretty common in the ketogenic diet. And many people probably do fine on it. But somebody like myself may, because of the autoimmune disease, may not be able to eat dairy or coconut oil. So if you do have an autoimmune disease or you hit a plateau or something, you might want to take those out and do an experiment. Another thing that's kind of specific to ketogenics is they'll tell you don't eat too much protein because you'll start producing glucose from gluconeogenesis. And it seems like that's not necessarily the case a lot of the time, because once people are fat adapted in particular, it seems like they can increase their protein levels. And if you're very active, you're using your muscles a lot, it seems to be especially unlikely that you're actually going to kick yourself out of ketosis. You actually get to a point where your body produces, particularly your liver produces the glucose you need. The glucose you need for cells that only burn glucose, like I think it's endocyte cells or red blood cells. And then there's your body will replenish glycogen in your muscles and stuff like that, and that's generally made from glucose. So you don't really need to eat any carbohydrates. And of course, in a ketogenic diet, you're typically eating a very small amount of carbohydrate. It could be anywhere from like 10 to 50 grams per day or something like that, which could, may or may not contain a lot of fiber. But from what I've learned, I really believe you don't have to do that. So we have to look at this question that was ingrained in us, just like not eating saturated fat, the vilification of saturated fat, animal fat, coconut oil even. Just because plants contain something doesn't mean it's a good idea to eat it. A few people would argue that you should sit down and drink a glass of orange juice anymore, especially since we know now that fructose, the primary sugar in fruit, is much more likely to cause fatty liver syndrome, and it's aggressively glycates proteins. So the sugar actually, when the proteins your body are exposed to the sugar, there's a process called glycation that essentially damages the proteins. And then you can also have advanced glycation end products, or AGEs, which are unhealthy as well. So you think of it from an ancestral standpoint, there were very few oranges available. Most of our ancient ancestors never saw an orange. They certainly weren't the big juicy kind that we have now, like all the other fruits and grains and even lettuce and spinach and kale and all the beloved sacred fruits and vegetables. They didn't exist. Carrots, if you came from the Americas or Mesoamerica, you might have had some corn and potatoes and stuff like that. But the rest of us aren't really adapted to that. And even rice wasn't cultivated more than 30,000 years ago. And when you're looking at an animal that evolved over 1,000,000 years, and you look back and you say, wow, they just went from place to place following the animals and eating the animals. And apparently they mostly ate plants when they couldn't get enough animals. It's a completely different impression or model that I was raised on anyways. And so this is kind of lending itself to this idea that we really might just need to be on a meat diet, especially if we have an autoimmune disease or obese or any number of other problems. So the model of the glass of orange juice, they say it's a great source of vitamin C, but so is spinach. All right. And of course, spinach isn't going to have the glucose in it. And not that I eat spinach anymore, anyways, but I eaten a lot in the past. Um, there's about 6 oranges in a glass of orange juice, of juice oranges. And again, remember, these oranges didn't used to exist, right? There were oranges of some kind somewhere, but they were smaller, they were more sour, they weren't as sweet. We certainly didn't grind up 6 modern oranges worth of a glass, have it by the glass full. Um, so it's not a natural thing to do. It might be just as bad as drinking a glass of Coca-Cola in terms of health. One or the other is probably not going to kill you. I don't know of anybody who's died of that, but making a habit out of it, either one, is probably a serious problem. So, and that's something like, I mean, how could you can't watch TV and not see a commercial for orange juice? You know, I grew up in California. There's plenty of oranges around here. The freeway was closed all the time because somebody spilled a load of oranges. And of course, I'm in California and I see commercials for Florida orange juice all the time, all the way on the other side of the country. So, you know, we could point the finger at bread and sugar and all that, but people don't often realize that this poor diet or wrong diet. I like to call it the wrong diet instead of the bad diet or anything, because I like to think that you cannot out exercise the wrong diet. Because I don't necessarily believe everybody has to be on the same diet, and I don't believe everybody has the same goals. And maybe, you know, somebody just wants to guzzle mimosas and eat toast, you know, and that makes them happy, and they don't care if they die early or their teeth fall out or their blood sugar goes to the roof, you know. And so, but most people have other goals, you know, and those goals should include an appropriate diet. And unfortunately, I think people have to take it upon themselves to figure out what diet works best for them. I know I grew up with this myth about scurvy. Like you had to have citrus with vitamin C in it in order to avoid scurvy. But if you go back and you read the journals from the sea captains and the explorers and all that, you come to find out their first choice for getting rid of scurvy was not citrus, it was fresh meat, right? And again, we live in a world where meat's the enemy a lot of the time, you know, and it's not just PETA, it started before that, you know, and there's influences from all kinds of groups, you know, not to necessarily say they're bad people, but the Seventh-day Adventists don't believe in it. Lots of Hindus don't believe in it, you know, and there's this sort of fuzzy warm feeling when you decide to be a vegetarian or a vegan or something, like you're doing something great for the planet, but you might really just be ruining your body and other people's bodies. So I think people need to look at it, and if you can find anybody out there that has scurvy, let me know. I don't think that disease exists very often anymore. So the carnivore diet is about fat from animals, avoiding plants. Animal fat more and more seems to have a protective quality. More and more they're seeing, especially people like with MS and stuff like that, seem to improve when they have diets that are rich in animal fat. And plant fats tend to show that they're irritating. So this is kind of the opposite again. You know, we know vegetable oils, and we say vegetable oils, and most vegetable oils are actually seed oils. So if you're looking at, you know, let's say your Crisco, your canola oil, stuff like that, even olive oil is probably maybe one of the better oils. But if you can avoid vegetable oils, all the plant oils, including coconut oil, and you have an immune disease, you might very well see a drastic improvement. So here's a picture. That's not, I didn't want to show anything too horrible, but that's what psoriasis can look like. And if anybody else out there who has it and they've been in groups with people online, you see some of the horrible afflictions that people have from it. And it can also affect your joints, and it could be linked to a number of other problems that can actually shorten your life. So I know myself, I have a problem with my fingernails. I've been increasingly concerned about losing fingernails. And there are a lot of people with psoriasis that lose their fingernails and they're gone for years and they never get them back. So this is really a continuation of an experiment, a nutritional experiment for me. And I really do these videos so I can share the information so at least people are aware of the information out there. People can look into it on their own. I don't do this expecting people just to follow me, but you know, the information out there is overwhelming. That's why one of the reasons why I try and keep the videos short. I do the book reviews. I talk about other sources like meat. The Meat Cult is another group I'm starting that's more specific to this. And then if you're on Facebook, Zeroing In on Health has been around for a long time. There's a lot of people in there with a lot of history. You can meet people in there that have been doing carnivore for 10 years or more. And then there's the World Carnivore Tribe on Facebook, which is a good place. It's been getting a lot of notoriety. And then websites like meatheals.com where you can read people's personal accounts of how the diet actually healed them. So anyways, the crux of this is it's a continuation of my dietary experiments in the hopes that it's going to finally finish off the psoriasis that's really just been the last lingering affliction. And of course, I'm still trying to cut body fat and improve my level of fitness, but that kind of goes without saying. I'm focused on the psoriasis because it's probably the most dangerous of the symptoms that I have. So, anyways, again, thanks for watching this video. Please pass it on and share the link with people. Please subscribe. Visit us on the Ketogenic Fasting Project on Facebook. I approve just about anybody who wants to join, as long as they seem like a real person and they actually want to join. I pretty much approve it. It's a very quiet, small group, and it's basically a place where I just warehouse all kinds of data. I find a lot of videos with interviews with doctors and PhDs and MDs and nutritionists and trainers and people doing the lab work and on and on and on. So, come join us there. Check out my other videos. This is number 42, so I have quite a few before this covering similar subjects. So again, thanks for watching, and I hope this helps you or someone else.